Sat Sri Akal, my name's Amma. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about my experience of being South Asian and queer, how I came out to my dad, what actually prompted me to come out to him, and some of the things I've learned. If you have listened to some of my episodes, you'll know that I usually have a topic each week and I'll dive straight into it in quite a lot of depth. But I think this week I want to switch it up a little bit and do a general story time of my experience that you might be able to relate to as well as find helpful. So it's been a few months since I've come out to my dad, and intuition is a woman's best friend. So over the last few years, especially the last year, my parents have been hounding me and asking me questions of, so when are you going to get married? Is there anyone special? And I feel like with parents, when they can see that their kid is a lot happier, or they're spending more time on their phone, or they happen to be hanging around with someone brand new in their life, obviously they're going to question and be like, who is this? But also I wasn't too sure because I don't really have that relationship with my parents where I can be 100% authentic and tell them everything about what I do in my life, who I'm seeing, who I hang out with, just even like general daily chit chat. So a part of me was like, okay, maybe they don't completely live under a rock and have some understanding that queer people do exist. But a part of me was also like, they were also raised in a different time, so I wasn't sure. And if you haven't already done so, I have an entire episode about marriage and I go into quite a lot more depth. So go and have a listen, go and watch. But as I was saying, I'd slip it into general conversation and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to my friend's wedding today who's marrying a girl. And I even remember one time my mum sent me a TikTok with these two girls getting married, and one of them was Asian, wearing like beautiful lenga, which is like bridal Asian wear, and the other woman was white, wearing a white wedding dress. So I was so confused and kind of gassed to be like, oh my God, does she know? I'm not sure. But either way, I was like, I'm just going to pretend to not notice it and just be like, oh, okay, it's a nice video. But low-key, I was so gassed. But again, I couldn't be too sure because my parents can be unpredictable. So fast forward to the day I actually came out to my dad, which was in February this year, and we're now in June 2024. We went to Westfield, which is like a massive shopping centre in East London, and there's like an M&S cafe there, and we were like, okay, cool. So my dad usually takes me shopping and we'll always grab coffee after. And the crazy thing is, before we left to actually go out, he was like, you know, you can tell me anything. And I was like, okay. And he turns around to me and he goes, is he BMW? One part of me was like, how do you even know that word? And the second part of me was just too stunned to speak. BMW means black, Muslim, white. And in South Asian culture, it is very common for Indians to be super racist towards other races as well as themselves. And BMWs are seen as like we can't marry into those families or those races because they're so racist. I was just like, okay, I'm not having this conversation and just, we're going to brush the casual racism under the carpet because what the hell? How am I going to tell my dad that actually no, I'm queer, and you trying to find out who I'm dating is quite frankly none of your concern, especially with the attitude he has towards it. So after casually brushing past his racism, we're in this cafe now. So he was like, have you found a man yet? What are your life plans? Just general chit chat. And I just turned around to him and I was like, would you accept and love me if I wasn't into men? And he giggled a little bit. I don't know what I was expecting, if he was going to get angry or say something, but I was definitely not expecting him to giggle. And he was like, oh, me and your mum kind of had suspicions, but we weren't sure. He said that my mum had mentioned it to him that, I think Aman might be gay or queer. But he didn't say anything further than that. To be completely honest, my coming out story was quite mellow in the initial coming out bit. But what was more traumatic was the aftermath as to how messy it was. In terms of what actually prompted me to come out in that moment was the fact that over the years, and as I mentioned, especially over the last year, me soon turning 25, the pressure subconsciously was really getting to me. And I kind of became sick of just my parents and family members asking me the questions constantly of, when are you going to get married and who's the special guy and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, do you know what? Mind your business. I'm actually gay. I'm actually queer. Like, I'm not interested in this. And it gets so suffocating to the point where I felt almost forced to come out. What's also really common in South Asian families is for children or like adult children to only tell their parents about who they're dating when they decide to get married. And I don't mean this in terms of having commitment issues, but more in terms of me not wanting my parents to get involved in my relationship, number one, and two, they're never going to accept me being gay. or queer or bi or whatever it is. So that was that. But overall, I just became really sick of everyone asking me the same question over and over again, that I was just like, do you know what? This is it. Deal with it. I just want to be loved and respected for who I am. And more importantly, I'd rather tell my dad before any other chat shit auntie gets to him, because I think that'd be more upsetting. I'd rather him hear it from my mouth. So whilst we were on this M&S cafe, my dad literally sat across me and told me how he still loves me and he will be there for me, and really reassured me that everything was going to be fine. And we both agreed not to tell my mum because she's actually insane and I know she would never take it well, and I just couldn't be bothered for her massive flare up and to make a massive scene. So we just thought, forget it, we're not even going to tell her. And he reassured me that he wouldn't tell her. I think then I thought it went well, but after writing this episode, I kind of realized that some of the things he said were really messed up. He was like, oh, I'll have to meet you in secret and I can't tell anyone about this, that no one in my entire bloodline is queer. And obviously, like, that just is not true because queer people have existed for such a long time. And the fact that I would have to make a decision before 30, otherwise I'd just be expired or not good enough to get married, that I'm going to have to live miserably with a man or miserably with a woman. And either way, I'm going to have to make a decision, but it's really up to me, which is just so messed up. So after, I wasn't really too bummed out and we just continued shopping, didn't really think much of it. And I just left there saying that all I care is for you to just still love me. I don't care if you don't accept my decisions, but I just want to be loved and respected. That is it. And he agreed. So the aftermath of coming out has been so horrible. I constantly battle with enforcing boundaries and keeping a distance from my parents to protect myself. So for context, one minute my mum will tell me that, oh, you're a disappointment and I wish you were never born and all these horrible things. And then another minute she'll be packing me with food and being like, oh my God, take this and take that. And that's her way of either apologizing or showing love, which creates so much confusion for me. And it leaves me feeling even more disappointed. And a part of me even felt stupid for coming out because I was like, how could I even think it would have gone well? But that's just how I feel now, and hopefully it gets better. But for now, it's just really jarring. I did say how intuition is a woman's best friend. And I felt after coming out to my dad that there was a real distance between us that he had created. Me and my dad went from talking on the phone almost every day to FaceTiming to messaging all the time. It went from that to him just messaging me good morning, which he does every day even now, which is cute. But at the same time, I felt something was off. So after about 2 weeks of being in denial, I just called him straight and I asked him, are you being cold with me? Are you giving me the cold shoulder? I really am looking for some reassurance here and I don't want to overthink it. So if there is something going on, can you just tell me? And sadly, my intuition was right because he responded saying, well, what do you expect? How did you expect me to respond? That when I go home, mum sees me feeling down or looking down, and of course I'm going to tell her, even though we both had decided not to tell her because she's insane. But he still went on and told her, which, number one, violation of my trust. And number two, I was right in regards to him being cold towards me. So after going back and forth in that conversation, we both just decided, you know what, let's just meet in person. Let's just talk it out rather than going back and forth on the phone. We both agreed to meet on Sunday because I was going to be in the area for a class, which was a sound bath experience. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be in his area. I'll be able to see him. And he said, fine, I'll come and pick you up. This man calls me at 7:30 whilst I'm in a sound bath. And if you've ever been to one, you'll know that you can't really pick up your phone because it's meant to be a really tranquil experience. You're meant to relax. You're not really meant to be on your phone. So he calls me. I obviously don't pick up and the class overruns about 20 minutes. Before I could even get a word in edgeways, he's going on about, oh, I've been waiting for 45 minutes. I've been here. You didn't come. It's getting dark. I needed to go home. Blah, blah, blah. I've got work in the morning. And I'm just like, whoa. As soon as he said that, I instantly just started bawling because I was coming off an emotional high from a sound bath. I felt really disappointed and I questioned why my dad couldn't even wait for me. Because if my child called me and said, hi, I'm stranded, or I need you to come and pick me up, or we had agreed to meet, I would do anything to get there. So for me, I was like, my dad couldn't even wait and left me stranded. I was not close to home. It was really dark. It was cold. It was wet. And again, I just felt really disappointed because that's just not something he would do. And I felt like, are you just doing that to be petty because now you know this big secret of mine? Or are you just being awful for the sake of being awful? I think sometimes both of my parents feel in denial as to me being queer and the fact that when they actually met my girlfriend, they loved her. And out of all my friends, they have never treated any of my friends with so much love and care, in the sense that they were always nice to my friends. But with my girlfriend, they adored her to the point they would always ask about her. They would always talk about her. And I'd always bring her up in just general conversation. And they knew that she was a big part of my life. I think even a part of them maybe knew that she was my girlfriend, but because I hadn't said it, I think we all just kind of lived with a little bit of delusion and this idea of ignorance is bliss. But now that they know that she is my girlfriend, they feel like, oh my God, how can this person who we absolutely adore actually be our daughter's girlfriend? And she's actually amazing. That they always thought that maybe the partner I'd choose would just be awful and they'd just automatically hate them because I've never cared about who I date in terms of like culture, background, religion. If I love you, I just love you for you. And they can't be an ally to accepting my relationship because if they did, then their society wouldn't accept them. I wouldn't be surprised if my mum's had some influence on my dad's opinions because obviously they're married and they're going to talk. So my mum putting her opinions onto my dad in regards to how she feels about the queer community, which isn't so positive. And I know she has some narky behaviors. So even if my dad deep down is like, okay, I don't agree with what my daughter does, but I still love her, he probably feels quite restricted to openly accept me because of societal pressures and what people will say, as well as the time that both of my parents were brought up. So I can understand it might be something very difficult for them to accept, but it's not fair on me to mold myself to be something that I'm not and live a life where I'm not being authentic. So it's very common for people to live a double life where it's not them being their authentic selves just to please their parents, which is so heartbreaking. But for me, I never wanted to be like that. It's always been, take me as I am. You might not accept my choices. I just want to be loved and respected as the bare minimum. So fast forward to now, I've come to the realization that I shouldn't feel like I need to de-gay myself every time I'm around my parents. Don't get me wrong, I don't walk around screaming that I'm queer, holding like rainbow flags and being all in your face, but I shouldn't be made to feel like I can't even mention my girlfriend's name when she is such a big part of my life. So since then, I've really made the conscious decision to limit the amount of information I share with my parents in terms of my life and what I do in terms of my friends and career choices and relationship. And it sounds really sad, but it unfortunately has had to come to that. Surprisingly, me and my dad are doing a lot better. And I think distance does make the heart grow a little bit fonder. We went from being so close to not talking as much to having a weird distance to then being like, okay, let's see how we can reestablish our relationship. And again, I try not to have too many expectations to avoid disappointment. I'm also happy with where we're at right now. I'm going to embrace that as much as I can rather than overthinking it. If things are to go left and he again decides to disappoint me, I'll cross that bridge when I get there because I know that the storm will always pass. But unfortunately with my mum, just because of her narky behaviors and me not feeling comfortable enough to share that part of me, even though my dad has told her, I haven't said it myself that I'm queer. And I don't think I ever will because I don't feel like I need to. But for me, I know it's just best I establish my boundaries for my own mental safety and just general well-being. You don't get to call me a disappointment and then pretend like everything's fine the next day as if nothing happened. I'd rather you just keep the same energy and keep it stepping rather than confusing me. In terms of what I do differently, I'd say nothing because I feel like it was upsetting me more to keep it in, especially because me and my dad have had a turbulent relationship in the past and I was so happy when we rekindled it. So for a long time I felt like, okay, we're getting closer, I'm loving this, but there's also this big part of me that I'm hiding and I wish I didn't have to. I wanted to have a very open and transparent relationship with my dad. And I feel like now we've even gotten a bit closer because I am able to share so much with him. And I also love that he comes to me to have really deep conversations. I know him more on a level as a human being rather than my dad who I need to fear. Even though at the time I felt uncomfortable and almost pressured to come out, I have no regrets because now that it's out, I have nothing to fear. That being said, I strongly believe that queer safety is far more important and should be prioritized in terms of you wanting to come out. So queer safety can be anything from physical safety, financial safety, mental safety, whatever it may be. You don't owe anyone an explanation. So how you decide to come out, or if you decide to come out, is completely your choice and your own journey. So don't let anyone try and talk you into it. Even if you do feel the pressure, prioritize your queer safety first. So sometimes ignorance is bliss, but I think for me, in my situation, it was important for me to come out. It doesn't surprise me that so many of us feel like we can't be our authentic selves because we're not given that space to be authentic within our own homes and families. And our parents are from a completely different generation with different thoughts and opinions. So you feeling like you can't be yourself is a lot more common. And you're definitely not alone. If there's anything I could recommend is to make sure you surround yourself with like-minded people who love you and support you and accept you for the way you are, as well as going to spaces that are queer-friendly and networking with people who are queer. When you're around those people, you're constantly reminded that you're not alone. Since having a girlfriend and really falling in love with my queerness and settling into it, I've experienced a lot more homophobia, may it be in public or even with strangers, sometimes even at work. I've seen some of my colleagues who I initially got on with, then suddenly they change how they are towards me after somehow finding out that I might have a girlfriend, or they've seen my lock screen and I'm with a girl and it's like, And it is really unsettling, but I just make a mental note to be like, okay, you're homophobic, stay away from me. And sometimes it's strangers that will look at me when I'm with my girlfriend in disgust. First, they'll look me up and down, then they'll look at my girlfriend and then give me a disgusting look to be like, oh, how could you possibly be queer? Since for the most part, I look pretty straight for whatever the hell that means. And apparently I don't look queer enough, or whatever their opinions are. I don't really care. But the point I'm trying to make is, since accepting my queerness and being more open with it, I've felt a lot more people be homophobic towards me. I feel very proud to say that I'm South Asian and queer, and I will continue to surround myself with people who love and accept me. With my dad, I do appreciate that he's trying, but I also don't want to be made to feel small, so boundaries are key. I also understand that because I openly decide to talk about this topic and openly disclose my queerness, which, by the way, I thought is something that I would never talk about. Before I even started this podcast, that was one of the topics that I said I will never talk about. So it's really interesting how I've done a 360 and I'm like, well, I just don't care. I'm proud that I've openly spoken about this today. Just because I've decided to be open about it doesn't mean that you also must do the same. As I said, prioritize your situation. Everyone has different circumstances, and queer safety is most important. If this episode is something that you feel like you can relate with and you would like some more support, please feel free to reach out. I am more than happy to talk. I hope you understand that this is a safe place, that there needs to really be more representation of South Asians, especially South Asian queers. Being queer is something that has existed from the beginning of time. So back in the day, people were just out here having orgies and threesomes because gender wasn't a concept then. So even if men were sleeping with men and women were sleeping with women, it was fine. It wasn't up until, I believe, around the 18th century when straight men started to realize that, oh my God, gay men and lesbians don't help the patriarchy in any way, because women having sex with women, you can't have babies, women are not going to marry the men, and then there's no continuation of a family, as well as for men sleeping with men. And then suddenly, with of course no surprise, the straight men decided to make being gay an issue, because being gay does not benefit the patriarchy in any way. And with knowing that, it goes to show queer people have existed from the start of time, and so have South Asian or ethnic people that are queer have also existed from the beginning of time. So if it's something that you are struggling with, please remember, you are not the only queer person in your entire bloodline. Definitely somewhere down your great-great-great-great-grandma or grandpa, someone was out here living up their best queer life. I must say, I really enjoyed this episode. If it's something that you want to hear more of in terms of story times, because I know I've covered a lot of deep topics, but then I also have lots of general stories from my life. And I think after visiting the podcasting show, which is a networking event for podcasters, I genuinely give less of a shit about what the typical male gaze is going to think of me, because that is not what my podcast is for. So if that is something you want to hear more of, do just drop a comment. Let me know what you think. But sadly, that brings me to the end of this episode. I hope you guys could relate or had some insight towards my story of being South Asian and queer. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them below. I can't wait to post this and see what comes from it. It is slightly a little bit daunting and definitely makes me feel vulnerable more than I'd like to, but this is me really putting myself out there because I care and want to have more representation of South Asians and queer South Asians. For anyone watching, I thank you so much. For anyone listening, I again thank you so much. You'll be hearing from me very soon for the next episode. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Sat Shri Akal. Bye.